Khayat with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا وجعلنا سراجا وهاجا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة. تسبق ذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you, Brother Mustafa, for that beautiful recitation. Let's give him another loud salawat. Brothers and sisters, welcome once again to the final night of our 2022 Arbaeen program. Before we begin, I have a few short announcements. Started yesterday and continuing until tomorrow, there will be a silent auction which is held outside. The art pieces are made by professional artists within the community and will be auctioned off until tomorrow, inshallah. So please see the NYC table out front for more information. Also, follow Muslim Youth Connection at NYC Media on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to stay up to date on all of our programs. The topic of tonight's program will be Imam Hussein's short-term and long-term victories, delivered by our dear Sheikh Basill Al-Haddad. And after his discussion, we will have a latmiyah performed by Brother Mustafa Saleme. Now, please help me welcome our distinguished speaker, Sheikh Basill Al-Haddad, with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So the topic, as Brother Ahmed said, was we're going to discuss the victory of Imam Hussain alayhi salam's mission from the short-term lens and from a long-term lens, inshallah. So yesterday we went over a few important prerequisites, you can call it, regarding Imam Hussein's mission, regarding the different narratives that described Imam Hussein's personality, described his mission, and described Ahl al-Kufa. So today we will cover different points and we'll go over some misconceptions, inshallah. And hopefully at the end there will be a lot of important matters that will be made clear, inshallah. So, just one loud salawat, thank you. So the mission of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, as we discussed yesterday, there's different narratives that described it. And I told you that if we were to line up all of the narrations in all of the books from the different schools of thought that described Imam Hussein's mission, we will conclude with three main categories. The first category branches or traces back to the propaganda of Bani Umayyah. The second group, which is the largest, traces back to Bani Abbas. And the third traces back to the Imams from Ahl al-Bayt. Now I'm focusing on this and I'm repeating it for the second time due to its importance. Bani Abbas, why am I mentioning them? Some people might not have a good idea of who they are. They were the longest lasting Islamic dynasty. They ruled after Bani Umayyah for a much longer period of time. And if we were to do a compare-contrast between Bani Umayyah and Bani Abbas, it would be a very difficult topic to discuss and see who is actually worse, who did more evil. But I'll just throw it out there that Bani Abbas are not our friends at the end of the day. They killed more imams than Bani Umayyah. And that's just from the killing standpoint. But when we get to the actual deviance they caused, it's undescribable. So it's not safe to just rely on their narrative without doing some double checking and actually making sure that this, corresponds and agrees with the narrative of Ahl al-Bayt. So, the mission of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Yesterday, we said, okay, according to the narrative of Ahl al-Bayt, not the enemies of Ahl al-Bayt, Imam Hussein's mission was to do what? To seek reformation in the nation of his grandfather, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, and to follow the path, the footsteps of his father, Ali ibn Abi Talib. So technically, if we want to actually go deeper into the mission of Imam Hussain, it requires us to what? To go back to the nation of Prophet Muhammad when he established it, and to really have a better understanding of the mission of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Because whatever Imam Hussain is doing, he's continuing the mission of his father, Imam Ali alayhi salam. So like I said yesterday, there's a big chunk of years between Ashura and the passing of Prophet Muhammad. So in order to have to grasp what happened to the nation of Prophet Muhammad, that it needed reformation, we have to go back in time a little bit. So I discussed a few points yesterday, some main events in a timeline, so that we can kind of get an understanding. So just to kind of paraphrase, Imam Ali's mission, Imam Ali alayhi salam's mission was to liberate and revive the Sunnah of the Prophet. And like I said, the Sunnah of the Prophet is what? It's three things. It's the words of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his actions, and his affirmations. So we take the Sunnah of the Prophet. Something happened to the Sunnah of the Prophet after his passing. And it's very crucial and it's very important that we hold on to the Sunnah of the Prophet as Muslims. Because our Islam is not complete without the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. So something happened to the Sunnah of the Prophet. And like I said very strongly, and I stand by it, the Sunnah of the Prophet was attacked. It went through multiple attacks for a very large chunk of years, for over 24 years. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he finally became the Khalifa, his role, his mission was to liberate and revive the Sunnah of the Prophet. So did Imam Ali alayhi salam succeed in that? Technically, yes, but not in all of the Islamic territories. Only in the territories that he had control over in that short period of time. So let's talk about Imam Ali alayhi salam's his role and the time frame that he was in charge, so we can have a better understanding what his son's roles are going to be. In order for us to appreciate the actions of our imams, we have to understand the circumstances, the main variables that took place at that time. When we understand the variables, we understand the circumstance, then we will have a better understanding, we'll have a better level of appreciation of what they did and what they accomplished. So, let's go to the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam. After the passing of the Prophet in the year 11, in the second month of the year 11, there was three rulers that ruled the Muslim empire. Say XYZ. You were punished by the state. And then this thing called fabrications and distortion of narrations took place in a very high scale. You know, one of the very first narrations to be fabricated was the hadith that one of the first ruler made up to confiscate the land of Fadak from Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. And that's one of the examples, a very clear example of a fabrication, where somebody completely makes up a narration and says, I heard Prophet Muhammad say 1, 2, 3 to justify whatever policy they're making. So we have many fabrications, we have many distortations, and in the whole time, there's a void, there's a gap where the actual true Sunnah of the Prophet is non-existent, except for whatever the government narrated. So why is Imam Ali important when it comes to the Sunnah of the Prophet? Why is Imam Ali important when it comes to the Sunnah of the Prophet? There's many companions, hundreds of companions in the Muslim land, correct? So what's special about Imam Ali? Is it just that he's the cousin of the Prophet? Is it just a matter that he's the son-in-law of the Prophet? Is it a matter of he was the most brave and courageous man on the battlefield? What is special about Imam Ali when it comes to the Sunnah of the Prophet? Because a lot of times when you ask somebody, ourselves, we can go around and survey each other. Why is Imam Ali so important when it comes to Islam? What is the good things he did, or what is his importance and significance? Oftentimes we only focus on the battlefield moments, right? In the battle of Badr, what he did. In the battle of Uhud, how he saved Islam. In the battle of the trench, how he saved Islam. In the battle of Khaybar, we could go on, the battle of Hunayn, and so on and so forth. All of these events that required courage, right? And we focus on Imam Ali as if he's just a warrior. But when it comes to the sunnah of the Prophet, why is he important? So, we can go on and list the companions of the Prophet. Those who lived in the time of Prophet Muhammad, witnessed him, and heard his ahadith. The reason why Imam Ali is so important when it comes to the hadith of the Prophet is because first, he was the very first Muslim. But on top of everything, he spent the most time with the Prophet. But still, on top of that, we have historical records that prove from all schools of thought that Imam Ali had private sessions with Prophet Muhammad after Fajr prayer and after Isha prayer, twice a day. He had private meetings where he would sit in the side of the masjid with the Prophet, and the Prophet would speak and he would write. How many times? Twice a day for how many years? 24 years. No other companion, nobody can claim that there's another companion that actually preserved the sunnah of the Prophet, that had access to the sunnah of the Prophet like Imam Ali did. So Imam Ali, technically, out of all the companions, is the only one who has the capability to preserve and continue the sunnah of the Prophet. Because it was a dictation where he would write and the Prophet would speak and Imam Ali would write. And Imam Ali would basically check his work type of thing, verify it. And even Imam Ali asked him in one of the narrations, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, are you scared I'm going to forget? Is that why you're making me write?" And he said, "No, write for your partners, shurakaik. Write for your partners who will use this later on." And I'll get to this soon, inshallah. But at the end of the day, there is no companion who has access to the sunnah of the Prophet and has the ability to preserve and continue and teach the sunnah of the Prophet like Imam Ali alayhi salam. So just from the standpoint of writing the hadith, nobody can compete with Imam Ali in that aspect. So a void took place, these attacks on the sunnah took place, right? It got to the point where the Khalifa can himself publicly supersede the authority, the religious authority of Prophet Muhammad. This, for me and you, if we think about this is impossible. If somebody did that in front of us and said, "I admit that Prophet Muhammad had this and this halal, and I choose to make them haram, and I'll punish you if you act upon them," we would not accept that. We would not allow that in our faces, right? Now imagine back then. So yesterday I mentioned a point that is crucial, and I'm going to repeat it, so hopefully it sticks in your mind. This is a crucial point that we cannot forget, which is after the passing of the Prophet, about 2 to 3 years after, the Muslim empire multiplied in size. Multiplied almost to the Atlantic Ocean from the western side, and from the eastern side almost to the border of India. I mentioned Pakistan yesterday, but technically back then there was no Pakistan. So to the borders of India from one side and almost to the Atlantic Ocean from another side. The Muslim nation now just adopted coastlines, trade routes, military fortresses, castles, multiple lands, multiple nations, races, languages, all types of things, right? So the majority of Muslims now, soon after the passing of the Prophet, are new converts. They're not Arab, they don't speak Arabic, and whatever they are being taught about Islam is whatever the government is giving them. So they didn't witness Prophet Muhammad, they didn't sit with Prophet Muhammad, they didn't hear about Hadith al-Thaqalain, they didn't hear about Hadith al-Manzila, they didn't hear about Hadith al-Ghadir. We can go on and on, Hadith al-Mubahila. How many ahadith do we have that display the virtue and greatness of Imam Ali alayhi salam? They did not have access to these ahadith. So, when somebody gets up and tells them, I'm basically superseding the authority of the Prophet, for them, whatever the government tells them, that's what they do. It's not a big deal to them. Because they don't know the importance of Prophet Muhammad, they don't know the importance of his sunnah. And this is another point I'm focusing on. I remember when I was in school, this was a big issue. Why are Shia so much less in quantity than mainstream Muslims? And they used to use this as evidence to prove that the Shia are wrong because you're less in number. Well, step one, what I just mentioned, that's a big variable you can't take out of the equation. From the very beginning of when there's so-called this split in Islam, there was a huge multiplication in the population of mainstream Islam. So mainstream Islam followed You know, the book of Allah, the sunnah of the Prophet according to whatever they allowed, and the policies of the two sheikhs, the two first rulers, okay? And whatever they did, you had to abide by. So, the third Khalifa, actually, he was given bay'ah, he was given allegiance under this condition, that he abides by the policies and the rules of the two sheikhs, the first two rulers. And that's why Imam Ali refused that unfair six-man vote, if you're familiar with it. So this just is a sample to show how important the seerah of the shaykhain, the policies of the two sheikhs was. It was even more important than the sunnah of the Prophet. So now, you know, you imagine 24 years. All of these Muslims from all around, okay? This is the type of Islam that they're being taught. They're not being taught the Islam of that Prophet Muhammad preached and taught and acted upon. So now imagine the importance of Imam Ali's mission. Because sometimes we have to remind ourselves. The importance or the main mission of our Imams is not to sit on a throne. It's not to be the so-called caliph and have people obey them and be treated like a king. That's not the goal and the mission of our Imams. It was not the goal of any of our Imams. What is the goal of our Imams? It's to guidance, to guide the masses, to guide the people, to allow the people to have an option to follow the pure Islam. So Imam Ali, for 24 years, he was, you know, when you just to simplify it, 24 years after the passing of Prophet Muhammad. And you just think about this real quick. I mean, the Imam was born about 10 years before revelation, 10 years before Islam started, okay? Before the prophetic mission. And then he dies all the way in approximately the year 40 after Hijrah. So there's a big chunk of years. But when you think about what events come to your mind when you think of Imam Ali, what do you know about Imam Ali? Everything is going to fall into two areas. Either the beginning of his life, up to the passing of Prophet Muhammad, or the very end of his life, the last 4 years. But the big chunk in between, 24 years, almost a quarter century, most of you are just, even I, we're going to be silent. We don't know. So Imam Ali, in that period of time, all of these events are taking place. Islam has multiplied. These people now have been raised on this type of Islam. And now Imam Ali has to do what? He has to revive and liberate the Sunnah. So I'll fast forward a bit. Imam Ali becomes Khalifa. It was a surprising event. It was not part of the plan of those who killed the third Khalifa. They had somebody else in mind, but the people ran to the house of Imam Ali and basically forced him to put out his hands so they could pay allegiance. He becomes a Khalifa. Once he becomes a Khalifa, all of Quraysh unites to do what? To stop Ali ibn Abi Talib. To make sure he does not remain as a Khalifa, does not remain influential. He's their biggest enemy. Because if anybody has the ability to preserve and to teach the truth and the true Islam, it's going to be him. And they thought that he was off the map. But now he surprised them. He's Khalifa. So they all joined forces to stop him. And if you have a map in mind, the main chunk of the Muslim military was in Sham under Muawiya, about 60% of the troops, and the other 40% were in Iraq. Half of them were in Basra and half of them were in Kufa. These are main military fortresses or military camps. So the first thing they did is they made a deal with Muawiya. You hold off Sham, hold off the western parts of the land, don't allow Ali ibn Abi Talib to have access to it. Your people have never heard of his name. They don't know him. They don't know anything about him. Don't let them have access. We will all go to Basra, take Basra, and then from there we'll march to Kufa. Then we'll have the entire Muslim army blocking off Ali ibn Abi Talib in the desert, and finally we'll get rid of him. In their calculations, they tried a few years before with 10,000 troops in the Battle of the Trench, and Imam Ali took them out. So they realized, okay, 10,000 is not enough, maybe 220,000. So now they have over 220,000, they're planning on having over 220,000 troops to finally take out Ali ibn Abi Talib. And what does Imam Ali do? He leaves Medina. He has a handful of troops. very small, very few. They have thousands. They have a military fortress. And they're a few hours away from Kufa, and then it's a sealed deal. So he sends Imam Hussain to Kufa. These people also don't know him too much. He sends Imam Hussain to Kufa, and Imam Hussain is able to do what? Rally up a few thousand troops. And they meet at Basra. And the Battle of Basra is important because these Kufan soldiers, they're fighting alongside Imam Ali against practically all of Quraysh. And one of the main commanders is the wife of the Prophet and the daughter of the first Sheikh. So it's a big deal. But they stayed loyal to Imam Ali within a few short hours. That battle was done, the victory was for Imam Ali. What does Imam Ali choose to do? He immediately migrates to Kufa. And from there he sets up his headquarters. And he sets up the capital for his new nation. And from there he trains and teaches these people who have loyalty to him. He teaches them the Sunnah. He gives them access to the Sunnah. And Imam Ali reverses the policies that were taking place for 24 years. He gives these people a chance to have access to true Islam. And who better to teach you Islam of Prophet Muhammad than Imam Ali alayhi salam? I gave you an example about the hadith he used to preserve. So now the battle of Siffin takes place. Muawiya now gathers an army of 120,000 troops, and all of the tribes of Quraysh join Muawiya against Imam Ali, and only 5 members from Quraysh stand with Imam Ali. Okay? And then it's one of the biggest civil wars in Islamic history. And due to a certain few, Imam Ali's army was winning, but they did not gain the full victory. That battle was done. They still had a lot of loyalty to Imam Ali. Just because a few members of the military did not listen doesn't mean the entire army betrayed Imam Ali. Then we move on to the next battle, Nahrawan. Another battle against the Qur'an of the Quran. And again, these people stick with Imam Ali and they fight in the battle of Nahrawan. So we have 3 main battles. These people stayed with Imam Ali. But it's not just they were soldiers fighting with Imam Ali. They had access, they were being taught, they were being trained the true Islam with the Sunnah of the Prophet. Imam Ali alayhi salam is assassinated. His mission did not reach the other chunk of the Muslim lands. Okay, maybe 60% of the Muslim Ummah on that side. They did not know about Imam Ali. They did not know the Sunnah of the Prophet. And how can I visualize this? We all have heard of the countless hadith praising Imam Ali, correct? By the Holy Prophet. When news reaches the people of Sham that Ali has been assassinated in the masjid, how did they react? What words came out of their mouth? What was their reaction when they learned that Ali ibn Abi Talib has been assassinated in prayer in the masjid, in the holy month of Ramadan? They asked, they said, he prays? Yusalli? What is Ali doing in the masjid? How is it possible for him to be assassinated in prayer? The man doesn't even pray. This gives us a glimpse, a hint of what kind of Islam these poor people are being exposed to. So now the role of Muawiya goes to the next level. Okay? Muawiya was basically the continuation of this government that was taking place. And Muawiya held his ground to make sure Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam Ali's mission, does not reach those territories. And Muawiya was preserving the Islam of the previous rulers. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. And basically I'm giving you a nice little timeline that you have to be able to understand these main events. You have to. In order for you to get any proper understanding, you have to go back a little bit. So now we fast forward a little bit. Okay? Imam Hussain is assassinated by Muawiya. Okay? What does Muawiya do? The 10 years before Ashura. And this will allow us to get a glimpse of the victory of Imam Hussain and the mission of Imam Hussain. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So Muawiya, in 10 years, I'm going to summarize it for you in the main points, the main policies that he did. First thing Muawiya did was he assassinated Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Imam Hassan's job in those 10 years before was preserving the Shia and preserving the Shi'at Ali. They had a headquarters, they had a capital, there was thousands of them who knew the Sunnah of the Prophet. He preserved their lives. And Muawiya was not able to do anything to the Shia of Ali. They're the biggest issue because they can continue to push Imam Ali's mission to the rest of the world. So in the time of Imam Hassan's treaty with Muawiya, for 10 years, Muawiya was not able to kill, oppress, torture, imprison a single Shi'i in 10 years. And this is a challenge for all of you today. Go, try to find the name of one Shi'i that Muawiya was able to imprison, torture, oppress, or kill in those 10 years. So he assassinates Imam Hassan to break that. First thing he does after that, he appoints this cursed man called Ziyad. You've all heard of Ibn Ziyad. He appoints Ziyad to be the governor of all of Iraq, Basra and Kufa. And his job is to eliminate Shi'at Ali from Iraq. That's his job. So the first thing this cursed person does, Ziyad, is he deports, forceful deportations of 50,000 Shi'i families from Iraq. These were soldiers of Imam Ali in the Battle of Siffin. He picks them up, them and their families, and he does what? He ships them off to eastern Iran, to Khurasan. And then their empty houses, he does what? He brings 50,000 Shami soldiers with their families and sits them in those empty houses. So what is he doing to the Shia? He's trying to get rid of them. So he starts with deportations. After that, now the remaining Shia, he can pick them up one by one. So then Muawiya's forces go after every known lover of Ali alayhi salam, every known student of Imam Ali, and takes them either to prison or execution. So for the next years, they followed every single Shi'i in Iraq to the point where all history books tell us this. Sunni, Shia, everybody. That they checked behind every tree and under every rock until there was not one known Shi'i in all of Iraq. This is all taking place when? This is before Ashura. There was not one known Shi'i in all of Iraq when Muawiya finally finished his job. So, and pay attention, 10 years before Ashura is when 50,000 were brought from Sham, loyal to Muawiya, and they sat there, them and their families. So if they had a 10-year-old son, 10 years later, he's a 20-year-old soldier. All right? His loyalties to Muawiya and Bani Umayyah, and they hate Imam Ali alayhi salam. That's very crucial, and I hope that also sticks in your minds. So now, he's almost done. Muawiya is getting old. He realizes, okay, my time is pretty much over. And he appoints his son Yazid to be the Khalifa after him. He forces people to pay allegiance to Yazid so that Yazid can continue the policies and this mission of this filtered and polluted Islam that they were preaching. Muawiya's mission, we were speaking about Imam Hussein's mission. What was Muawiya's mission? He also has a mission statement. And he says in his mission statement that, the brother of Taym, referring to Abu Bakr, he ruled and he died, and with him died his remembrance. And then the brother of Adi, referring to Umar the second, he ruled for a good 10 years and he died in demise, and also his remembrance died with him. Then he remembers his cousin Uthman. The same thing, I'm paraphrasing here. He ruled and he died, and there went his remembrance. Then he says, but Ibn Abi Kabsha, referring to the Holy Prophet, his name is yelled out, screamed out, shouted out on the manabir 5 times a day, referring to the adhan. 5 times a day we say what? Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, correct? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So Muawiya says that 5 times a day, Prophet Muhammad's name is shouted and screamed on the pulpits, and on the manabir, and for the adhan. Then he says, what remembrance, what of our mission is going to remain if this is there? if Prophet Muhammad's name is being screamed out in the adhan. So he says, La wallahi illa defnan defna. He says, by God, I will bury it, I will bury it, or I will bury it, I will completely bury it. He's going to bury the remembrance of Prophet Muhammad. That's Muawiyah's mission. He's continuing his predecessors, and he's putting on to full gear after that. So his goal is to completely take out the remembrance of Prophet Muhammad. So taking out the sunnah was not enough. Now he's going to what? He's going to bury the remembrance of Prophet Muhammad. This is very clear in the history books. So now comes the role of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So Muawiyah did so much to reverse Imam Ali's work and then to erase the remembrance of Prophet Muhammad. Few months after is the revolution, the uprising of Imam Hussain. We can't look at the uprising of Imam Hussain just in the year 61 and up to Ashura and it's over. It's not over, it has just begun. And Arbaeen is a great way that forces or allows us to know that this revolution of Imam Hussain doesn't end with Ashura, it continues. So if we look at the events that took place in the short term after Ashura, we see that everything that Muawiya did got reversed. Everything he tried to do, he tried to erase all of Imam Ali's work. It got all reversed. So Imam Hussein's revolution, it led to the Shia, those who were still alive in the prisons, to break out of the prisons and to get out and to completely kick out Bani Umayyah from those Shi'i lands and kick out their governors and kick out their rulers and bring back the Shia that were in hiding, that were in different parts of the land, and they brought back the policies and the teachings of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So that's a bit of a short term, and if you're familiar with Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, it kind of gives you a little taste of that, okay? Where they're able to remove Bani Umayyah, bring back the Shia, and bring back the policies and the teachings of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which is the Quran and the pure Sunnah of the Holy Prophet. So now if we kind of fast forward and you think about some of the stuff I said, it should ring a bell. So are we saying that the people in Iraq, when Imam Hussain went to Iraq, were not Shia? They weren't the Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam and they just betrayed the Imam? No. So if you paid attention, the people in Iraq at the time that Imam Hussain came to Iraq were who? They were the Shamis that had been relocated by Muawiya 10 years prior. Them and their families. So when we say that when we refer about the people of Kufa, this is a misconception we need to keep in mind. And when I talk about the people of Kufa in the early times, I'm referring to those who were known as what? As the loyal followers of Imam Ali and of his teachings. Some of this might ring a bell and you might like, what is he talking about, people of Kufa? Is he hinting that the people of Kufa were good people who had loyalty to the Imams? Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. The people of Kufa in the time of Imam Ali and Imam Hussain and after Imam Hussain, these are who? These are the loyal Shia. And they had many enemies. Those who were enemies to Imam Ali and Imam Ali's mission were enemies to the people of Kufa. They hated them. The people of Kufa were nothing but bad news to them and to what they stood for and what they wanted to propagate. So step one, the people of Kufa the true Kufans from Imam Ali's time, they did not kill Imam Hussain and they did not betray Imam Hussain. This was the work of, if anybody from Kufa, it was the Shamis who lived in Kufa. When I refer to the Shamis, I'm referring to the loyal, basically those military men, soldiers that were from Sham, from Muawiyah's army who were relocated to Kufa. We have a narration from the Imam that describes to us in Al-Kafi about Tasu'a. And he describes to us who surrounded Imam Hussain. Okay, and the Imam says, ذَلِكَ يَوْمْ حُوصِرَ فِيهِ الْحُسَيْنِ مِنْ قِبَلِ خَيْلِ أَهْلِ الشَّامِ. You can look this up, it's in Al-Kafi. The Imam says that is the day that Imam Hussain was surrounded by the horsemen, the military horsemen of who? Of Ahl al-Sham. So now you might ask, okay, well, what was Muslim ibn Aqil's job? Why did he go to Kufa? And you're probably thinking, oh, he went to Kufa to verify the loyalty of these people. So if you pick up what I said earlier, the Kufan tribes are what? They're all mixed up and thrown around. And Imam Hussein's mission is to start after Ashura. Muslim ibn Aqil was the son of Aqil, who is an expert in the lineages of the Arab tribes. So he knows who's who and from where. So Kufa, for a stranger, looks the same. But for somebody like Muslim ibn Aqil, who's knowledgeable in the tribes and who's originally from Sham and who's originally from Kufa, he can differentiate who is the remaining Shia of Ali and who are those of the Shi'at ibn Abi Sufyan. So there's a few different points that I discussed today briefly, and these are, just hints, little samples of some of the important points in our history that we need to be familiar with when it comes to understanding the mission of our imams. And we need to understand some of the background information. We need to understand some of these events. So I just wanted to give you as much as I could regarding these events. Obviously, you can imagine this requires courses in order to have a better understanding. So now we go into the next few years. We go down the centuries. That was the short-term victory of Imam Hussain. Let's go to the long-term, and I'll end with this. So the short-term is that the Imam's revolution was able to bring back the Shia of Ali, who had access and the knowledge of the Sunnah of the Prophet taught by Imam Ali alayhi salam. But now let's go to the long-term. And I mentioned yesterday that the mission of Imam Hussain resulted in what? In people like Imam al-Sadiq to have capability to spread the Sunnah of the Prophet to the masses. And like I told you yesterday, that if we look at the amount of narrators, those who said, I heard Ja'far ibn Muhammad say 1, 2, 3. If we look at the different narrators that narrated from Imam al-Sadiq versus those who narrated from Imam Ali had about 400 plus different people narrate from him. Imam Hussain only had about 141 or 109 different people narrate from him. Imam al-Sadiq had 3,217 different people narrate from him. Say, I heard Ja'far ibn Muhammad say 1, 2, 3. Okay? So when we just look at that, that by itself shows us that Imam Hussein's mission to revive the Sunnah did work. It was a success because now people had access to the Sunnah. And then this whole people of Kufa thing being bad people, yes. The enemies of Ahlul Bayt hated Ahlul Kufa. You know what? I want to read off a few examples of that. Okay, I have a timeline of 125 years from the Battle of Jamal all the way down to Bani Abbas, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. And instead of me, I can come here and read you all the narrations that praise Ahlul Kufa, all the narrations that speak ill about Ahlul Kufa, and then we can go back and forth in the authenticity and try to prove who's who. But let's put that to the side and let's just look at the enemies of Ahlul Kufa. Just in the time of Imam Ali, the Battle of Jamal against the heads of Quraysh. Who was the army of Imam Ali? Ahlul Kufa. And they took out who? The army of Quraysh in Basra. And then we go fast forward, the Battle of Siffin, the biggest civil war in Islamic history. Who was the army of Imam Ali? Ahlul Kufa. Fast forward a bit, go to the Battle of Nahrawan. Who was the army of Imam Ali? Ahlul Kufa. Look at what Muawiya ibn Abi Sufyan did in those 10 years I talked about before Ashura. Who was he attacking? Ahlul Kufa. Then we fast forward a little bit, look at what Yazid did in his period of time, right? His main focus were the Shia of Iraq and of Kufa. Then we're not done there. Go 4 years later and look at what the Kufan armies were doing, the Shia armies of Iraq doing after Karbala to the armies of Bani Umayyah. How much battles took place? And you go, is it just with Bani Umayyah? No. So we got Quraysh. Then we got Bani Umayyah from the Sufyani side. And then we have Bani Zubayr, who was Mukhtar fighting towards the end of his life. It's Quraysh from Bani Zubayr. Then we're not done there. We go back to Bani Umayyah from the Marwani side. Abd al-Malik and all of his people. Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi by himself killed 120,000 Shia. These are all mainly from Kufa because the Kufan families represented the bulk of the Shia. They were the headquarters of the Shia. I'm not saying it was only in Kufa. We had Shia from the time of Imam Ali who went all the way to South Lebanon, right? But the center, the capital, the headquarters for the Shi'i heritage was from Kufa. And I can go on and on to all of the different people from the mainstream Muslim, government that are attacking who? The Kufans. And why? Very simple. Because they were narrating the ahadith that came through Imam Ali's chain and not from the mainstream, from the government side. So yes, they were a problem. They were enemies. They were not loyal, but to who? To the government, not to Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain. Most of Imam Sadiq's companions and students were all from Kufan families. So that by itself for me, is enough. Obviously, there's going to be talk about Ahl Kufa and talking about how bad they are because look at who their enemies were. The Kufans preserving and pushing the teachings and the narrations of the Imams is what caused books like Sahih al-Bukhari to be written and Sahih Muslim and At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah and Sunan Abi Dawud. All of these books were written to catch up with the work of Imam al-Sadiq from his companions. So there's a lot to be discussed, and if you want more information, contact us through Knowledge Seekers on Instagram or on Facebook, and inshallah, we'll be at your service. I hope you got a glimpse of some of the important matters when it comes to these historical events, and I'll end there. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Thank you, Sheikh. All right, now we will have Latmiya recited by our dear brother Mustafa Saleme. So please help me welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. ثانيا على حب الحسن والحسين. This is going to be our last day for us, this opportunity to serve Imam Al-Hussein with Latam for Arbaeen. So if I can please ask the shabab, the guys, to please come forward, and inshallah we'll do, it'll be a short latmiyyah, but it's gonna be good inshallah. Please, تفضلوا shabab, تفضلوا. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. رأسك يا ابن الطهر الصباح تشرق من بين رؤوس الرماح. رأسك يا ابن الطهر شمس الصباح تشرق من بين رؤوس الرماح. منار في السماء سليل الأنبياء ناعي الأسى في الطف لما نعى. أرادك الله بأن ترفع للرأس قد خص القنا موضعا. وهكذا يعلو لواء الكفاح منار في السماء سليل الأنبياء منار في السماء سليل لم تعلو بل فيك العلا قد علا وهكذا المجد وإلا فلا طودا عهدناك يجير الملا كيف يهز الطود عصفور الرياح كيف يهز الطود عصفور الرياح منار في السماء سليل الأنبياء منار في السماء الأنبياء شاء إله الكون أن يرفعك فاختار في أفق القنا موضعك يا حسين يا حسين شاء إله الكون أن يرفعك فاختار في أفق القنا موضعك يا ليتنا في الطف كنا معك يا ليتنا في الطف كنا معك نذوذ عن جسمك رمي القداح نذوذ عن جسمك رمي القداح منار في السماء سليل الأنبياء منار في السماء سليل شاء إله الكون أن يرفعك فاختار في أفق القنا موضعك يا ليتنا في الطف كنا معك يا ليتنا في الطف كنا معك نذوذ عن جسمك رمي القداح نذوذ عن جسمك رمي القداح منار في السماء سليل الأنبياء منار في السماء سليل الأنبياء رأسك يا ابن الطهر شمس الصباح تشرق من بين رؤوس الرماح رأسك يا ابن الطهر شمس الصباح تشرق من بين رؤوس الرماح منار في السماء سليل الأنبياء منار
السماء سليل الأنبياء
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد.